Talk now to the Conservative MP, Rehman Chishti, who is the MP for Gillingham in Kent. He's also a former advisor to a woman who was then Pakistan's Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto, and he's obviously been an advisor as well before he became an MP to various prominent Conservative politicians. Rehman Chishti, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. I mean, there is a kind of a reality here, isn't there, where whatever the arguments about the decision to get out and whatever the arguments about the past that preceded it, we are in a situation where it looks like the Taliban is de facto in charge of Afghanistan. What do we do in terms of establishing some kind of relationship with that regime?
Well, I think what we have to look at, of course, is what is the ground reality in Afghanistan now. Is not what we would have liked to see, but what is so concerning to many around the world is that the United States has not learnt from the past at all, actually. In 1989, the United States, the international community, left Afghanistan after the Russians were defeated through the use of the Mujahideen, which we, the international community, supported. And after that episode, the Afghanistan was abandoned. In came the Taliban, then came Al-Qaeda. And now we look at the situation. The United States has done it again with the international partners left. And the end game is a complete messed up scenario, which has now led to the Taliban coming in. So your question is, what can we now do? Well, the first question I have to ask is this, is the reason we went into Afghanistan in 2001 was with regards to a national security imperative. And the question now is, it's how effective are we, the international community, going to be with regards to a national security threat by not having a small military presence on the ground in Afghanistan, which has helped avoid a security threat, terrorist attack around the world for the last 20 years. So the ground reality now for us is, how many levers do we have? And the answer to that is, I think we're very limited in terms of levers that we have, because there's so many other international players, involved in the situation. You've got Russia, you've got China, and you've got neighboring countries, Iran, and you've got Pakistan. So on that basis, the question for us is, what can we do? What levers do we have to bring about, firstly, the one key commitment from the Taliban, accepting that they are now in effective control of Afghanistan, is to work with international partners to ensure that the assurances are given that Afghanistan will never, ever, ever be used by terrorist organizations to launch or harbor terrorist activity.
So is there effectively the quid pro quo here? You don't become a kind of a host, a hiding place for those who are trying to do us harm in our countries. In return, we offer you some kind of financial support that will help you to stabilise the country. Presumably, that's all we can do, isn't it? I mean, we can't start talking about you have to, guarantee these things, whether it's women's rights, whether it's education, all the rest of it. Because actually, as you said, our levers, however much we want those things, our levers are so limited.
I think to answer that point, pretty frankly, actually, is to say we want to talk tough. You can't do this, or you can do this. We're in a very difficult position with regards to what we can push hard to deliver. With regards to the reality on the ground now is they now control, at this point in time, whether they're able to control that land for a very long time is a different matter. But at this point in time, what are the levers that we have to push them to comply with certain conditions? And I would say, yes, we do have leverage, but it's limited, but it's working with other countries. For example, on the security point, China next door also has a real concern because of the Xinjiang province with regards to the Uyghurs and Afghanistan. To say China is sitting easily most certainly is not the case. They have a security issue there. Pakistan, 3 million refugees in Pakistan from Afghanistan, and over the last 40 years has lost over 70 to 80,000 people. So on security, I think we can work with China, Iran, Russia, and other countries. We may not see eye to eye in other areas to push on the security side. On the carrot approach is to ensure that, look, we want to help rebuild Afghanistan so that the ordinary citizen in Afghanistan does not suffer, but not directly giving money to the Taliban, but other developmental support within the country, and then see how genuine they are for reform. They say it,
yes,
but I think the proof's in the pudding.
A lot of people will, just on that question of rebuilding Afghanistan, will say, well, we spent an awful lot of money there already, not least to support an army that pretty much vanished from the battlefield, as Joe Biden rather bitterly implied in his statement yesterday. We've already cut international aid by 0.5%, so presumably the amount of money we have available to Afghanistan when we other projects in other parts of the world is going to be limited. Putting all of that to one side, you mentioned a very important point about regional players, about China and Iran, Russia. Pakistan, of course, hugely important. A lot of controversy in the past over Pakistan's relationship with the Taliban and whether or not Pakistan's security was helping to encourage groups like Al-Qaeda when they were operating in Afghanistan. Imran Khan, the present Prime Minister, has been quoted as saying the people of Afghanistan have thrown off the shackles of slavery. Pakistan is an ally of Britain as well. What can we hope from Pakistan, given that kind of rhetoric? Because presumably, frankly, building a good relationship with Afghanistan is much more important to Pakistan than what we think.
I think you're absolutely spot on. But before I just come to Pakistan, can I just say this? With regards to developmental support for Afghanistan, the ordinary citizens in Afghanistan, who need our help, we did Friends of Syria, getting other international partners, the NATO countries who were in Afghanistan, over 40, they all have to come together through a contact group the United Kingdom can facilitate, bring them all together. Your point on Pakistan, I think you're absolutely right. Which country has suffered the most with the withdrawal of the international community from Afghanistan in 1989? When Benazir Bhutto's government came into play, she had to deal with the world abandoning Afghanistan. And as a result, they've lost 80,000 civilians. And also you saw the Peshawar school incident, which were innocent children killed by the Taliban in Pakistan. The country itself has suffered immensely as a result of what's been going on in Afghanistan into Pakistan. Large border. They need our support. So with regards to your point, we've cut international development aid from 0.7% to 0.5%. I voted against that. I think in international global Britain, we need to support, our individuals around the world who need it to build cohesive societies. So what support are we going to give to neighboring countries such as Pakistan or others? Pakistan taking in 3 million refugees already. They're being asked to take more. What support are we going to give them? But you're absolutely right. The issue of what happens in Afghanistan, the country, Pakistan, it knows these elements in Afghanistan because over the years it had to deal with them in its own national security. So ensuring there's no terrorist threats coming from Afghanistan is as much important to Pakistan as to the United States, as to UK, as it is to people in Germany around the world. So I think on that is absolutely crucial. But the other thing I would say in terms of our leverage with the Taliban, their three main trading partners are the Pakistan, it's then Iran, and it's China. So in terms of our leverage at the moment, we don't have that much leverage available to us. It's working with the regional players, whether it's China. We may not agree with them on many things, on their values, but I think on this, from a national security perspective, we have to work with them and other international partners to ensure everything that can be done to ensure that the issue of our security is maintained.
Just while we continue our conversation, I want to point out to people that that news conference I mentioned in Kabul, hosted by the Taliban's media spokesperson, is beginning. We can look at some pictures of that. I have to say we don't yet have an English translation of what he is saying, but this news conference will obviously give us some indication, some enlightenment, hopefully, about what exactly the Taliban is planning for the coming weeks and months. Rehman Chishti, let me ask you one last point. I was talking to a Tajik Afghan who lives in London in exile, and he was saying there are a lot of people in what are minority communities in Afghanistan who are worried about what this may mean, how Pashto will use their new power and influence under the Taliban. Is this something that concerns you?
I think it most certainly does. Look, I was the former British envoy for religious freedom or belief around the world and worked with international partners to address the issue of individuals being persecuted for their faith. And in Afghanistan, you've got the Hazara Shia community, which has in the past been persecuted. You've also got a very small Sikh and Hindu community, which has been persecuted. So absolutely the issue of minority rights. And what comes now is working with international partners is to see how the new Taliban administration, it says it's got a new way of doing things. Whether I believe it or not, I think is a different matter. But if they really want to change and reform, as they're saying, the proof is in the pudding, is with regards to how they treat minorities, signing up to those commitments and keeping with them with regards to an inclusive Afghanistan respecting minority rights. But yes, I, as the former British envoy for religious freedom, have real concerns with regards to minority rights or individuals of minority faith. And therefore, in our evacuation program of the most vulnerable, we have to ensure women, children, people of different faith backgrounds, we take into account the minority faith aspect to it and ensure that our resettlement program is as generous as it possibly can be in these difficult, challenging times faced by the ordinary citizens in Afghanistan, many of whom have supported us in this battle over the years against the extreme elements of Taliban.
Rehman Chishti MP, thank you very much. Very good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.